There's something quietly unsettling about Capricorns that no one talks about. On the surface, they're the dependable ones, the high achievers, the people who always seem to have their lives perfectly together. But behind that polished exterior lies the zodiac's most calculating strategist, moving through life with the precision of a chess grandmaster playing 100 games at once. What makes Capricorns truly dangerous isn't what they do, but what they get away with while maintaining their impeccable reputation. That coworker who always gets promoted over more talented peers. The family member who controls everyone while appearing perfectly reasonable. The friend who somehow always comes out on top, no matter the situation. These aren't coincidences, they're evidence of Capricorn's patient, methodical approach to power. While other signs might be flashy with their manipulations, Capricorns operate differently. They understand that true influence comes from playing the long game, from building trust slowly, from positioning themselves as the only logical choice. Their discipline isn't just admirable work ethic, it's a weapon they wield with terrifying precision. Their famous patience isn't virtue, it's the ability to wait years for the perfect moment to advance their position. The most brilliant part of their strategy? Making everything look completely legitimate. A Capricorn doesn't steal your promotion, they simply ensure they're the only viable candidate when the time comes. They don't start fights, they just know exactly which bureaucratic rules to invoke at the perfect moment. Their greatest trick is making their calculated moves appear like natural progressions, leaving no fingerprints behind while everyone else scrambles to keep up. By the time we're done today, you'll start seeing the patterns everywhere. That time you were passed over for an opportunity you deserved. The relationship where you always seem to be giving more than you received. The family dynamic where one person's needs always seem to matter just a little bit more. These aren't accidents, they're evidence of Capricorn's quiet dominance at work. So tell me, when was the first time you realized the Capricorn in your life might be playing a deeper game? That moment you brushed off as bad luck or circumstance? Look closer, because with Capricorns, nothing is ever quite as simple as it appears. 1. The long game assassins. Capricorns don't believe in quick victories or emotional outbursts. Their power comes from the glacial patience of a predator that knows exactly when to strike. While others get distracted by short-term gains, Capricorns are mapping out trajectories years in advance, positioning themselves silently but surely for opportunities that haven't even materialized yet. That promotion they got over more charismatic colleagues? The inheritance that mysteriously favored them? These aren't accidents but the result of careful, behind-the-scenes maneuvering most people never notice until it's too late. They understand something fundamental about human nature, that consistency over time trumps flashy talent, that being the last one standing often matters more than being the first to arrive. What appears to others as simple diligence is actually a sophisticated strategy of elimination, removing obstacles so gradually no one thinks to protest. The colleague who suddenly transfers departments, the rival who inexplicably changes career paths, these might not be coincidences but evidence of a Capricorn's quiet reshaping of their environment to suit their ambitions. Their greatest strength is making their calculated patience look like virtue rather than the strategic advantage it truly is. 2. Emotional austerity program. Capricorns treat emotions like a limited resource to be carefully budgeted and allocated only when there's clear ROI. They don't do emotional outbursts or messy displays of affection. Every gesture, every word of comfort, every expression of care is measured and deliberate. This isn't coldness so much as emotional capitalism, where compassion is currency spent only when the returns justify the investment. What makes this dangerous is how it trains people around them to lower their expectations for basic human warmth while overvaluing the rare moments when Capricorns do show vulnerability. You'll find yourself treasuring their smallest kindnesses out of proportion, like a desert traveler grateful for drops of water. Meanwhile, they maintain complete control, never giving so much that they lose the upper hand in any relationship. Their emotional restraint isn't just personality, it's power, keeping others perpetually off balance and craving their approval while they remain safely detached. The cruel irony. When you finally call them out for being distant, they'll frame it as your neediness rather than their withholding nature, making you question whether expecting basic emotional reciprocity is somehow unreasonable. 3. Bureaucratic warfare. Capricorns have turned red tape into an art form and policy manuals into weapons. When challenged, they don't engage in direct conflict, they simply invoke obscure rules, create complex procedures, or initiate endless reviews that exhaust their opponents into submission. That coworker who tried to challenge a Capricorn's authority? Suddenly buried under a mountain of compliance paperwork. The family member who disagreed with their plans? Faced with a labyrinth of logical concerns that never seem to resolve. Their genius lies in making this obstruction look like responsibility rather than resistance, framing their roadblocks as prudent caution rather than the power plays they truly are. They'll cite precedent when it suits them and ignore it when it doesn't, all while maintaining perfect plausible deniability. What appears to others as frustrating bureaucracy is actually a sophisticated defense mechanism designed to maintain control while avoiding direct confrontation. The most dangerous part. By the time you realize you've been outmaneuvered, the Capricorn has already documented every step of the process, leaving you looking like the unreasonable one for trying to circumvent proper channels they created specifically to stop you. 4. The credibility heist. No sign appropriates others' ideas with quite the same surgical precision as Capricorn. They have an uncanny ability to absorb innovative concepts from more creative types, then present them with better organization, clearer documentation, and more convincing data, claiming all the credit while appearing completely above reproach. That brilliant suggestion you made in last week's meeting? Watch how it resurfaces in a Capricorn's presentation with slightly refined language and impeccable supporting evidence, making everyone forget where the idea originated. Their secret isn't theft so much as strategic enhancement. They know most people are too disorganized to properly defend their intellectual territory, and they exploit this weakness ruthlessly. What makes this especially effective is how they frame their actions as collaboration rather than competition, making you feel honored rather than robbed when they build upon your concepts. They understand that in professional settings, execution often matters more than ideation, and they position themselves perfectly to capitalize on this reality. By the time you realize what's happened, the Capricorn has already cemented their reputation as the competent one while you're left struggling to prove the idea was yours to begin with, a battle you'll likely lose because they've already documented everything while you were busy creating. 5. Silent treatment torture. When angered, Capricorns don't yell or make scenes, they deploy a far more devastating weapon, perfectly calibrated indifference. Their disapproval isn't loud but deafening in its quiet precision, a gradual withdrawal of attention and approval that leaves victims scrambling to understand what they did wrong. The temperature in the room drops imperceptibly when a Capricorn is displeased, their responses becoming just polite enough to maintain deniability while making their displeasure crystal clear. This isn't the dramatic silent treatment of other signs, it's a sophisticated psychological operation designed to train behavior without ever having to articulate demands. You'll find yourself modifying your actions not because you were asked, but because you've learned through subtle cues what earns the Capricorn's rare approval. Their emotional withholding creates an economy of attention where even minor acknowledgments become valuable currency, keeping you perpetually striving for validation they dispense with calculated scarcity. The genius of this tactic is how it makes you complicit in your own manipulation. By the time you realize what's happening, you've already internalized their standards and are policing yourself on their behalf, all while they maintain plausible deniability of ever having demanded anything at all. 6. The practical gaslight. Capricorns have perfected the art of dismissing emotions under the guise of rationality, reframing valid feelings as inconvenient obstacles to be overcome rather than addressed. You're hurt about being overlooked? That's not a relationship issue, it's an inefficiency to be solved. Your need for affection. An impractical distraction from more important matters. They wield logic like a scalpel, surgically removing emotional considerations from every equation until only their preferred outcome remains. What makes this especially insidious is how they'll often be technically correct in their assessments while completely missing the human element, and worse, making you feel foolish for caring about it. They've turned emotional intelligence into a weakness rather than a strength, creating environments where only measurable results matter and anything intangible gets dismissed as sentimentality. The cruel twist. When they do experience emotions themselves, suddenly practicality takes a back seat to their needs, but they'll frame this as necessary rather than hypocritical. You're left constantly adjusting your expectations downward, accepting less and less emotional reciprocity while being made to feel unreasonable for wanting basic human connection from someone who's supposedly so grounded in reality. 7. Social climber's rope. Every relationship in a Capricorn's life undergoes constant subconscious evaluation for its utility potential. That cheerful neighbor. Potentially valuable if they work in banking. The old college friend. Worth maintaining if their family has political connections. Capricorns don't do meaningless socializing. Every interaction, no matter how casual, carries the potential for future advantage in their meticulously calculated worldview. What makes this dangerous is how genuinely likable they can be while maintaining this mercenary approach to human connections. You'll feel special and valued right up until the moment you're no longer useful, at which point their attention shifts with cold precision to more promising prospects. Their social strategy isn't cruel so much as ruthlessly pragmatic. They simply refuse to waste time on relationships that don't offer clear paths to advancement, whether professional, financial, or social. The most unsettling part. They'll often maintain just enough contact with discarded connections to reactivate them if needed later, keeping people perpetually available like books on a shelf to be taken down when useful and returned when not. Their network isn't a web of friendships but a carefully curated portfolio of human resources, each relationship carrying an invisible ROI calculation only the Capricorn can see. 8. The bait and switch mentor. Capricorns excel at offering just enough guidance to create dependency while withholding the crucial information that would make you truly independent. They'll take you under their wing, share carefully selected wisdom, and position themselves as indispensable advisors, all while ensuring you never quite learn enough to surpass them. That promising protege who mysteriously plateaued. The talented junior employee who never got that final piece of career advice. These aren't oversights but strategic decisions to maintain the Capricorn's position of authority. Their mentorship isn't about nurturing growth so much as controlling its trajectory, keeping others perpetually one step behind while appearing generous with their knowledge. What makes this especially effective is how they frame their withholding as teaching resilience. You need to figure this part out yourself, sounds much nobler than, I'm protecting my advantage. They understand that true power comes not from hoarding knowledge completely, but from doling it out in measured doses that keep others reliant on their guidance. By the time you realize you've hit an artificial ceiling in your development, the Capricorn has already moved on to their next acolyte, leaving you grateful for what you did learn rather than angry about what was withheld. 9. Passive-aggressive perfectionism. Capricorns have turned high standards into a subtle form of domination, using their own competence as a weapon against those who can't meet their exacting benchmarks. That sigh when reviewing your work, the slight pause before saying, it's fine, the way they'll redo tasks you've already completed, these aren't innocent actions but calculated reminders of your perceived inadequacy. Their perfectionism creates an environment where you're constantly striving to meet impossible standards while they maintain position as the only one who truly understands how things should be done. What makes this especially effective is how they'll frame their criticism as helpfulness. I'm just trying to maintain quality, sounds much better than, I need to reinforce my superiority. You'll find yourself working twice as hard for half the recognition, perpetually off balance and unsure whether you're being fairly judged or psychologically manipulated. The cruel genius of their approach is that the better you perform, the higher they raise the bar, ensuring you never quite reach the level of approval that would allow you to feel secure in your position. Their version of perfection isn't a fixed target but a constantly moving goalpost designed to keep you striving indefinitely while they remain safely positioned as the ultimate authority. 10. The corporate spy. No sign gathers intelligence with quite the same quiet efficiency as Capricorn. They know everyone's salaries, relationships, and career aspirations while revealing nothing about their own plans. That casual coffee chat where you shared your ambitions? That wasn't friendly bonding, it was strategic intelligence gathering. Capricorns understand that information is power, and they collect it with the same diligence they apply to everything else in their lives. What makes this dangerous is how they use this knowledge without ever appearing to. The promotion you didn't get, the project that went to someone else, the raise that never materialized might all be connected to information you casually shared months earlier. Their spycraft isn't dramatic cloak and dagger but the patient accumulation of small details that add up to significant advantage over time. They'll remember which coworkers are dating, which executives are unhappy, which departments are about to restructure, all while maintaining an image of being above office politics. The most brilliant part? When they do use this information, it's always framed as coincidence or logical outcome rather than the result of careful manipulation. By the time you realize how much they know about you compared to how little you know about them, the power imbalance is already firmly established in their favor. 11. The emotional blackmail. Capricorns keep meticulous mental records of every favor, every kindness, every sacrifice they've ever made, and they will deploy this ledger at the most strategically advantageous moments. That time they covered your shift in 2017. They remember. The introduction they made to their contact last year. Noted. Their version of reciprocity isn't organic but calculated, with implicit expectations attached to every gesture no matter how small. What makes this especially effective is how they'll wait for the perfect moment to cash in these chips, when you're vulnerable, when the stakes are high, when saying no would make you look ungrateful. Their favors aren't gifts but investments, and they expect returns with interest. The cruel twist is how they'll frame their accounting as simple fairness. After all I've done for you, sounds reasonable until you realize the scale is permanently tipped in their favor. You're left perpetually indebted, not because they've done so much more for you, but because they've ensured every action on their part carries an invisible price tag while your contributions get dismissed as expected or insignificant. Their generosity isn't selfless but strategic, designed to create networks of obligation they can activate when most needed. 12. The reasonable tyrant. Capricorns have perfected the art of making authoritarianism sound like sensible leadership. Their demands always come wrapped in logic and practicality, making resistance seem irrational rather than justified. That unreasonable workload? Just good business sense. The cancel time off. Necessary for the team's success. They position their dictates as the only reasonable course of action, leaving no room for dissent without appearing petty or emotional. What makes this especially dangerous is how they'll often be partially right. There usually is some rational basis for their positions, just amplified and applied with zero flexibility. They've turned compromise into a one-way street where others adjust to their standards while they make no concessions themselves, all while maintaining an image of being the only adult in the room. Their version of fairness always seems to benefit them disproportionately, but they present it with such calm assurance that challenging them feels like arguing with gravity. The most frustrating part. When you finally push back successfully, they'll often co-opt your position as their own idea weeks later, having tested the winds and adjusted their stance just enough to maintain control while appearing flexible. 13. The legacy trap. Capricorns understand that the promise of future recognition can motivate present obedience better than immediate rewards. They'll dangle the possibility of promotions, inheritances, or key opportunities just over the horizon, keeping you striving indefinitely for approval they may never actually give. That project that could really put you on the map next year. The role you're being groomed for in some vague future. These are often less concrete plans than psychological tools to maintain your investment and compliance. What makes this especially effective is how it taps into fundamental human needs for purpose and validation, keeping you working harder for longer in hopes of someday earning the Capricorn's elusive full endorsement. They understand that promised rewards often motivate better than delivered ones, because the fantasy of what might be is usually more powerful than the reality of what is. The cruel genius of their approach is that by the time you realize the goalposts have moved yet again, you're already too invested to walk away, trapped in a cycle of perpetual striving for a destination that never quite materializes. Their legacy isn't just what they build for themselves, but the generations of people they've inspired to keep climbing mountains whose peaks always stay just out of reach. 14. The bureaucratic veto. When challenged, Capricorns don't engage directly, they invoke processes, precedents, and policies that just happen to favor their position. That innovative idea you proposed? Unfortunately, it conflicts with Guideline 7.3.b. The change everyone wants. Against long-standing tradition. Their genius lies in making obstruction look like responsibility, positioning themselves as guardians of order rather than defenders of their own interests. What makes this especially frustrating is how they're often technically correct. The rules they cite usually do exist, the processes are technically required, but you're left wondering who created these systems in the first place and why they always seem to benefit certain people. They've turned organizational inertia into a personal defense system, knowing most people will eventually give up rather than fight through layers of bureaucratic resistance. The most dangerous part. By the time you realize you've been outmaneuvered, the Capricorn has already documented every step of your unreasonable attempts to circumvent proper channels, leaving you looking like the problem while they maintain their image as the voice of reason and order. 15. The retirement revenge. Capricorns understand that true power often lies in waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That colleague who crossed them years ago suddenly finds their promotion blocked by mysterious forces. The relative who slighted them at a family gathering wonders why they were left out of the will. Capricorns play the longest of long games, biding their time with icy patience until their target is most vulnerable and least expecting consequences. What makes this especially chilling is how they'll often maintain pleasant relationships in the intervening years, giving no hint of the accounting happening behind their calm exterior. Their vengeance isn't emotional but calculated, delivered with the same dispassionate precision they apply to everything else in their lives. The most brilliant part. By the time the blow falls, it's often impossible to connect it directly to the original offense, leaving victims wondering if they're being paranoid while the Capricorn enjoys the satisfaction of justice served on their exact timetable. Their patience isn't just a virtue, it's the ultimate weapon, allowing them to settle scores when it's most devastating and least expected, all while maintaining their impeccable reputation as the reasonable one. After all this, you might be wondering, are Capricorns evil geniuses or just tragically misunderstood pragmatists? The truth lies somewhere in between. Their danger doesn't come from malice but from a worldview where everything and everyone has measurable value, where emotions are inefficiencies to be minimized, where relationships are investments to be managed. Now that you know their patterns, you'll start seeing them everywhere, in that boss who's always 5 steps ahead, that family member who controls through generosity, that friend who's somehow always in the right place at the right time. Knowledge is power, and understanding Capricorn's tactics is the first step toward holding your own against their quiet dominance. Because here's the uncomfortable truth, even after everything, you'll probably still respect them. Their competence is undeniable, their achievements impressive, their self-control admirable. That's their real power, making their version of reality so compelling that you question whether your objections are just weakness in disguise. So the next time you encounter a Capricorn, appreciate their strengths, just don't be surprised when the mountain they're climbing turns out to be made of everyone else's compromises. And if you're a Capricorn watching this, maybe ask yourself, when did winning become more important than what you sacrificed to get there? The ultimate achievement might just be learning when to stop calculating and start connecting.